I usually try to start these out with something funny or endearing, but I just don't know really how to make this one funny without sounding like a huge jerk, so I'm just gonna kind of go straight at the thing. You know what I really don't like are religious frauds. And by religious frauds, I don't mean people who doubt and struggle sometime or who don't know what to make of hard parts of the Bible but still claim to be a Christian. I think that lots of people are like that, and it doesn't make us fake, it makes us honest, because faith isn't necessarily the easiest thing in the world. What I mean by religious frauds are those people who, first of all, claim to never have any questions or any doubts about anything because God just tells them everything that they need to know. And then they tell you the things that you need to know, and weirdly, the net results of what people like that tell us about what God is telling them is always them getting more money and power and control, and you having more obligation behaviorally heaped upon you. I think they make the church look like a chump, and I think they make God look bad. Now, I think God is big enough to handle that. In Acts chapter 10, we're in a situation where Peter is about to go and meet with this guy Cornelius. God sent a messenger to Cornelius and said, look up this Peter guy, I want you guys to get together and talk. And so understandably, Cornelius, who's an outsider to all of this stuff, is going to respond with great reverence to Peter. But Peter, who apparently was not a religious fraud who liked to exploit people for money and control and subjugation, isn't going to put up with it. Peter's a guy who, even though he could be cocky at times, understood that God is the main character, God is the hero, God is the point, God is the object of worship, and not him. So as the message of God's redemption goes out to the Gentiles in a really big way here in Acts chapter 10, we're going to see the Christian that God chose to help bring about that change pass on the opportunity to exalt himself and become king of the church and receive the adoration of the Gentile minions, and instead come alongside this Gentile brother as a person of peace and as a peer, both of whom are coming into the service of the same God. I really like the way Peter comes off in this passage, and I really like the example that he sets, especially when contrasted with some of the weird things that happen in the name of Christianity even now. We're going to be in Acts chapter 10, verses 23 through 33. We're picking it up right from where we left off with part of verse 23. Then Peter invited the men into the house to be his guests. The next day, Peter started out with them, and some of the brothers from Joppa went along. 24. The following day, he arrived in Caesarea. Cornelius was expecting them and had called together his relatives and close friends. Both parties know that this is a very big event. One of the things that I think it's important to step aside and note too is that for Peter, this wasn't like, yeah, I could jump in the car and run down and meet you at Wendy's for a minute to talk about something, and then it costs him a whole 7 minutes of his life to drive down there and 45 cents in gas. The guy had to hike across roads and change his travel plans. This is a big time commitment, if nothing else. To the original audience, they would have said, wow, Peter took this seriously because he had to walk his butt over to this other place, and that would have taken a lot of effort. Verse 25, as Peter entered the house, Cornelius met him and fell at his feet in reverence. It seems like this Cornelius guy maybe thought the thing through in advance, and I don't know if this was spontaneous as much as he realized God is sending a representative to me. This is a very special and important moment, and I need to show utter respect. As a Roman soldier in the age where the position of emperor was becoming increasingly deified, maybe Cornelius was one who just had an assumption that when someone really remarkable sent by God is present, you show them absolute reverence. Whatever the case, Cornelius responds in a way that doesn't work or make sense for Peter. Verse 26, but Peter made him get up. Stand up, he said. I'm only a man myself. Look, obviously that's the right response, and we would be stunned if Peter did anything other than this. But how hard would it be not to accept that from someone else? Peter seems pretty quick on the trigger. He gets his standing before God. He always seems to quickly assume the proper position before God and is easily reminded of his place in the relationship and God's place in the relationship. Assuming a right position before God means one of submission. Assuming a right position with each other does not mean ascribing worship to other human beings. It's just weird. God had clearly already done some meaningful work in Peter's life that he didn't respond to that in a favorable way. And it also just raises questions for me about what's going on in the lives of people who are more than happy to exploit that kind of a relationship today. The contrast is important. There's a beauty in the humility that Peter demonstrates, and there's an ugliness that I think even as Christians we don't need to apologize for rejecting when religious people, even Christian people, are all too happy to exploit others in this way. Verse 27. Talking with him, Peter went inside and found a large gathering of people. 28, he said to them, "You are well aware that it's against our law for a Jew to associate with a Gentile or visit him. But God has shown me that I should not call any man impure or unclean." So sort of two gangs show up here. You've got the Jewish Christian gang rolling in to meet with the Roman occupying gang. Both sides anticipate a big, interesting, exciting meeting. It's not just that Cornelius is there, his whole household is gathered. Everyone's waiting with bated breath to see what it is that Peter is going to say. And then he drops this clunker right off the bat. Comes in, guest of honor. "Hey everybody, it's totally wrong for me to hang out with you because you are beneath me, and that's just kind of what our law says." What an awkward social moment. But then Peter adds a but to the end that makes the whole thing work a lot better. "But God has shown me that I should not call any man impure or unclean." And in this verse, we realize that Peter, by the work of God, has sorted out what that vision was in the last passage. He's figured out that God isn't just saying, "Look, I've backed off the dietary restriction thing, go crazy," but that what he's saying is that that dietary restriction thing is a metaphor in this situation for the people of the world, and that we no longer are doing a thing where certain people of the world are clean and set apart, and certain people of the world are unclean and it's not for them. It was meant to be for all of them all along. Now we're in a place in the history of redemption where that is being realized, and that is clicked for Peter, and he's saying this to this audience. And my guess is that everyone in Cornelius' house looked at him after that with a healthy degree of confusion, because that would make no sense to a non-Jewish audience. But Peter proceeds. "So when I was sent for, I came without raising any objection. But may I ask why you sent for me?" So now he's going to bounce the ball back to them. This conversation, it just doesn't register for us. And it doesn't register because to us, it's the ancient past. And the further back in history you go, the more things kind of just clump together. Yeah, it's Romans, Greeks, they're all basically the same thing, right? There were dudes who wore helmets a really long time ago and said stuff and spoke languages we don't know. But no, all this stuff was really different and really diverse, and in all the ways that you understand that even in a high school in 2015, you've got 100 different kinds of people, 100 different social classes and styles, and you can pick them out by what cut of jeans they wear, what kind of makeup they wear, what their hair looks like. So it was here. Everybody reading this would have understood how completely different these two groups of people were, and how clumsy and awkward it was going to be to put them in the room together over a religious matter in which they might have some agreement for the first time. So it's clumsy. Luke captures that it's clumsy. And now Peter's trying to say, why don't you tell me your thoughts on the thing so we can see if we can figure out what it would look like to even talk about this. Verse 30, Cornelius answered, 4 days ago I was in my house praying at this hour, at 3 p.m. Suddenly a man in shining clothes stood before me and said, Cornelius, God has heard your prayer and remembered your gifts to the poor. We're into verse 32 now. Send to Joppa for Simon, who's called Peter. He's a guest in the home of Simon the tanner, who lives by the sea. So I sent for you immediately, and it was good of you to come. Now we're all here in the presence of God to listen to everything the Lord has commanded you to tell us. Cornelius did not say, well, Peter, thank you for asking. Recently, I've just had vague feelings in my heart about God and life, sort of. That'd be fine, but this is something much more specific and much more obviously from God, because there's an address. Because literally, he's at this guy's house, in this town, at this place, knew him by name. There's stuff to point to the supernatural here. To the modern skeptic, this is not meant to be convincing to you. This isn't. That's not the genre of literature. That's not what we're seeing. This was meant to be convincing to a Jewish audience who would have been suspicious that God, a God they already believed in and assumed to work in ways like this, this is to confirm to them that God was indeed behind this message going out to the Gentiles, and that it wasn't just a theological innovation on the part of Peter. It's not meant to be compelling to you. It was meant to provide evidence to these believers that God was moving forward in this way. So here's my super clumsy paraphrase of Cornelius' answer. God appeared in a way that I can't explain in any way other than being completely miraculous. We went to the place that he said to go, and sure enough, you were there, and he said it was your name, and that's your name, and now you're here, so you must be hearing from him as well. And I really have no idea what happens after that, because I'm pretty sure there's a God, but I'm pretty sure I don't know much about him, and I'm pretty sure I don't know what to do next, so we're all ears. Peter's got to be chomping at the bit over this kind of a question. There have been a few times in my life when I've had somebody come up to me and say something actually like this. Hey, you're a Christian, right? Yes. I've experienced this. I've been reading this. I've been thinking about this. I feel like actually I might be interested in God, or God might be interested in me. What should I do? When I get this kind of an honest question, I get pretty enthusiastic about it. It's a chance for me to talk about one of the things that most makes me believe in God. I have rational, philosophical reasons for faith in God. I got all kinds of reasons that I believe what I believe. But one of the biggest and most unusual reasons that I believe is simply seeing what I believe God is doing in other people's lives. God changes people. I cannot quantify this. There is not a number that I can attach to it. But I've seen it again and again and again. People who only think about themselves suddenly don't after an encounter with God. People who don't give a rip about anything that's redemptive or meaningful beyond themselves suddenly do. And when I see that happen, especially when it's a pretty dramatic transformation, I feel like, well, the skeptic might write that off as just turning over a new leaf. But for me, I see the hand of God in it. I'm sure Peter was feeling exactly the same way because it's clear to him that this thing is from God, that this thing is going to be an honest process, and he knows that he's been prepared for conversations just like this. In the introduction, I talked about fake religious crap used to exploit and control. I utterly reject those things. I don't want to be that thing. I don't want to be associated with that thing. But I also don't want to be naive enough to pretend that those things don't happen. They do happen. On the one end of the spectrum, when those things occur, it feels gross and fake and frankly can push theists even toward atheism because it's so rattling and upsetting to listen to people do stuff like that in the name of God. But on the other end of the spectrum, are those conversations that are born out of honest goodwill and the work of God. Both of these things exist. It is silly for the theist to pretend that there are none who abuse because there are conversations that are genuine. Likewise, it is ridiculous for the atheist to assume that all religion is fake, a fraud, and there's no God because people like this who abuse exist. In any set of beliefs, both such types of conversations and such types of people will exist. If a thing exists, someone will figure out how to exploit it for their own benefit and power. But if the thing is good and exists, someone will also love it and cherish it and care about it and think it through in ways that are honest and meaningful and redemptive. I really think we're seeing the latter in this conversation. We're going to hear a lot more about it starting in verse 34 in the next episode in this big series on Acts chapter 10. I'm going to wait to get into the observations until I get done with all of this stuff, and we'll talk about it all at once. So we're going to hit an abrupt pause there. I'm Matt Whitman. This is the 10-Minute Bible Hour. More on Acts chapter 10 soon.